Hello, everyone. We're back. It's the Presents Posse. On this Monday, what day is it today? The 10th? The 10th, right? Of February 2025?
Yes, I think that's right.
Yes. Well, it's good to know. I was getting worried for a second. You know what they say about old people and their memories. We are today talking about presence and creativity. And today we are the ladies, Danielle McMahon and me, Miriam Siegel. And we are happy to see you. I'm going to do a little technical thingy here just to make sure that everything is working the way it's supposed to. And we are actually broadcasting, which we are. Yay!
Yay.
It's not always the case.
If it weren't for Miriam, we would never broadcast.
Well, I'm not so sure about that, but so far so good, at least this time. And we are back from last week. We're going to make fun of the guys because last week it was Fred Blum and Bobby Cobb, and they talked about the first episode of our trilogy, which was Presence and Imagination. Today's Presence and Creativity. And they apparently had a great talk.
Right? We don't know, though.
None of us have seen it. So just on the, what do they call it? For transparency's sake, we admit we haven't seen the talk. It actually, we can't find it.
Yeah, none of you have seen it either, probably.
Yeah. So we're going to pretend we've talked about imagination, and then we're going to go on to creativity, which is today. And I thought I'd just kind of dive in, which I often do, with something either that I've learned or that I've found in this that's relevant to the theme, the topic, and the claim, or maybe some sort of kind of definition, that creativity isn't about production. It's about participation, and participation implies that you have to be present. What do you think of that, Danielle McMahon?
Well, that's good, because as far as creativity to produce, I don't know that I've ever considered myself particularly creative, but I've created a good life. Right? Like, that was the thought I had as I was approaching this today, and I'm like, so I am creative in the sense of participating.
Yeah,
I like it.
I think, yeah. I just am mulling that over for a moment, which is really, that's quite lovely. I often think in the direction of when people don't necessarily think of creativity. Like sometimes when someone, this might sound a bit weird, but sometimes when someone is arrested for a crime, for example, and the crime will be described, and I'll be thinking, it's interesting how people use their creativity, like what they choose to create.
Right.
And so creativity, because creativity doesn't have this sort of, it's only creative if you use it for good things. Creative, at least from my perspective, creativity is creativity, and whatever you use it for is whatever you create. I mean, creativity is, we can be creative when we're sleeping, because it depends on what we're dreaming, for example, or even in what side of your body are you lying on, and which way are your feet? Or, I mean, there are a lot of ways to be creative that we're not necessarily conscious of. And having not heard last week's talk, I would kind of drag in the ability to imagine just about anything, and use creativity and imagination go kind of hand in hand. Yeah. And when imagination doesn't have any limits, like pure imagination, I'm not talking about when we limit our imagination, but just free imagination, it doesn't have any limits. So ideally, neither does our creativity.
Yeah. That's not how we're conditioned to think about it. I've
Say
been
more
called
about that.
out several times for saying that I'm not creative, right? Like
Ooh.
everybody's creative. And I have changed my thought process around it over the last many years. But I don't create in terms of artwork. I don't create in terms of um, productivity, as you said to begin with, and so then I can own that, being creative and participating, but also in participating with my imagination. Even then I feel like we're not conditioned that way. We're not conditioned to believe our imagination is a real thing. It's like, imagine, um, that's imaginary or it's real.
Right. Right, which is not, I mean, imaginary is not the same as imagination. And I think a lot of people think like imagination, that's for children,
Right.
but not for grown-ups. We have to be serious
And
and
that's
productive.
what we're taught, is when we're using our imagination as children, that's imaginary.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
not real.
Right.
Right. So then we lose some of our creativity because we lose access to believing our imagination, right? To loving playing in that atmosphere that children are allowed to do, but somehow when you get to school, that's daydreaming or being silly, or many other ways to put it down.
Yeah, it's
Suppress
not
that.
serious. Yeah. Except that, I mean, and it's interesting, I'm going to call you out. I like how I prepare you. I'm going to call you out. I heard you say something that sounded a lot like I don't use my imagination to be productive, for example. That was kind of sort of basically what you said. And I would beg to differ, because having been fortunate enough to know you for 3 years or so, and even having been fortunate enough to be where you live for a
Mhm.
while, you use your imagination productively a lot. You create courses. You work with your horses. You have children and grandchildren. You plan this huge birthday party in your barn. It was the barn, right?
Yes.
Yeah, with all kinds of activities and okay, with your daughter, of course,
Yes.
but still, it's like, how can you possibly say that you don't use your imagination? And I mean, even during our posse talks.
Yes, I can participate and be creative and be imaginative and those things, but I don't see that as productive. And that's the thought process that I've had to go through to see myself as creative at all, right?
Uh-huh.
Like, when I would say that originally, I'm thinking, and really it's not true at all, but somehow I had convinced myself of it because I'm not an artist, basically,
Hmm.
right? Then I'm not creative. But I actually am a published author. So I write.
There we
I'm
go.
creative, even in words there. And yes, I've created courses, and I have hosted workshops and retreats, and I'm working on one now. I'm very excited about it.
And we're working on a retreat, which was, if I recall correctly, your idea.
Yes. Yes,
The
that's the
Presence
one I'm
Posse, but
referring to. I'm working
anybody
on
wants to know. The Presence
a
Posse is going
retreat.
to be having a retreat, and we'll get back to you with more information. But that was your Danielle McMahon, your idea.
Yes, and somebody encouraged me. And
Yes.
then the reactions then encouraged me. So then I was really excited about it, and I have done some research, and some other things have become exciting about it. So I'm really creating there, imagining,
Very
and I'm spending time in imagination of what it could be and what it could look like and who will be there and all of those things. And I'm doing that quite intentionally now, because I do know that thoughts create things.
yes.
Thoughts become things. Yes.
Yes. As long as so this is actually, it's really cool that you're coming in to this sort of side of it, because you said already one thing that I think is actually quite important for a lot of people, and that is that we mistake creativity and artistry. Like, where if we're artistic, then we're productive, we're creatively productive, right? We have paintings or something like that, or sculptures, but creativity is pretty much everything. Um, and it doesn't have to have a price tag on it, it doesn't have to be able to be put on our bookshelf or hung on our wall or on a display table or anything like that.
So it doesn't necessarily need to be tangible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So that's, I think, a mistaken interpretation of creativity. It doesn't mean that you don't have to do those things or don't do those things. It just, creativity is not limited to those things. And then there's the creativity that comes from, to put it that way, imagination. Without, so it with if it stays in imagination, it's imagination. But once it becomes action, like, we can be creative in our imagination, but physical creativity, then, as you were talking about, from thought to things, there has to be some sort of action involved where
Yes.
we actually do it. Otherwise, it's basically daydreaming.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of the times, and we are all business people in the Presence Posse as well, and we all have met people that kind of seem to go round and around and around, or find themselves on a plateau at the daydreaming imagination stage, and not the active creation
Yeah,
stage.
so there's some inspiration that lands in imagination. Then there's an expired action that either we can take or not, right? So my inspired action after talking to a couple of my posse members was, then I started looking for venues and I started reaching out and talking to people. So those thoughts become things, right? So we have a place to do our retreat and we have the facilities, and that's just one step of it. Obviously, there's many more steps to get it into a full creation. But yeah, that's the process, I think, is that it has to, you make a choice whether you bring it through from your imagination by inspired action.
Yeah. Inspired action, meaning the inspiration comes from the imagination.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what is between, because I've heard you also say intention.
Yeah.
Right? So you have this imagination, this idea, this dream, and then somehow it becomes a thing, an action, for example, an inspired action, as you say.
Mm-hmm.
Let's play a little bit with, or I invite you to play a little bit with this idea of how does it get from the dream to the thing. And I mean, of course, you can
Well,
have
they
just
keep
one
using
answer.
this same example. I speak it, right? That's the first thing I do, is that I speak it to the people that would be involved
Mm-hmm.
and make sure they're in agreement to do that before I can make that a reality. If it were just me and I wanted to host a retreat, then it would be a different process. But when I'm in collaboration, then it has to be spoken to the collaborators and make sure they're on board with that before it can go forward. So maybe you can come up with another example that would illustrate what you're saying.
Well, yeah, but again, for me, it's interesting to explore that situation as well. There's this collaboration thing. You did speak the idea.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes a creative collaboration in a way where you're taking the lead quite a bit. And there's this idea of you present your idea, there's a positive response to your idea, and then there's an incentive, isn't there?
Right.
Like there's some kind of motivation. I mean, if the rest of the posse members had said, nah,
Yeah. There would be no incentive.
or even so, could have said, yay, great idea, Danielle, and then done absolutely not, or you could have gone on to do absolutely nothing,
Right.
even though there was an incentive or a motivation to go forward, or even what do you call it? My brain is a little bit slow, obviously, this evening because I'm having trouble finding the words I'm looking for. Not a consensus. There was definitely a positive, we'll say, where there was a positive reaction. I can't think of the word I'm looking for. Even with that, you could have not done anything. Mm-hmm. So there's this little piece in there that takes the creativity, that takes the imagination to an action where you can bring your creativity into it, like contacting venues and the kinds of conversations you're going to have, even the ideas for the retreat and who's going to do what, all of that. What is your impression of what had you go forward and actually act?
My immediate response is excitement.
That's interesting. Yeah. Is it like looking forward to a particular outcome?
Not an outcome so much as an experience.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. So I guess the outcome would be to actually have this experience.
And in this case, the experience is the retreat.
Mm-hmm.
And not the process going towards the retreat. You have like a carrot dangling, they talk about the carrot and the stick. Is it kind of like that for you?
Yeah, the process is new to me to do it somewhere other than home. Like I've done workshops and retreats here and I know how to do that. So contacting other venues and talking to people about that, this is all, yeah, that could be fun too, right? It's a learning a new, it's a learning curve, and that can be both exciting and nerve-wracking, right? But I didn't see it that way. I just saw it as exciting. So that let me go into an area where I had not, I don't have any previous experience, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which for some people or in some situations could be experienced as daunting rather than exciting. Right. I've never done this before. They have in Norway. We have what we as kids used to call Pippi Longstocking. Have you ever heard of Pippi Longstocking? Yeah. So she's one of these. I've never done that before. So I guess I'm going to be really good at it. It's just kind of like this. Yeah. So whereas she could have said, I've never done this before. Oh my goodness. There's no way I'm going to be able to do it. She was the type of person that's like, so I can only ever be good at it. Right. I haven't done it before. There's only one possibility. I'm going to be good. And that's, I think, because we're talking about creativity and presence and kind of connecting it to imagination, this idea of what stops the creative process, like what can get in the way of the creative process, the flow of it, and being present to that, right? So you're talking about excitement, for example. You thought it was exciting. If you had imagined it to be daunting, overwhelming, not possible, for example, or too much for you, anything like that, which is, I guess, the same as overwhelming, you might have gotten in the way of yourself, to put it that way. You might have stood in the way of the process, feeling that this was a daunting task. Like, where am I going to find a place that has horses? How are we going to get everybody to come from all kinds of areas of the world? Because we're everywhere. to this one place, and how many people and all of that kind of thing. And when is this going to be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That could have been for you. It could have felt like a lot. And then a reaction could have been, oh no, like stopping the creative process.
Inaction, right?
Yeah,
Like that.
right.
And I am actually quite prone to inaction, and I am prone to it in that there is something in me that is not Pippi Longstocking, right? That is like, I've never done that before. I'm not gonna do it until I know all about it. But the excitement overrides that. And I
Mhm.
like, I am a trained retreat facilitator. So this is also just an opportunity to put that training into action. So that can be.
Again, the positive, or what we also will say the useful side of it, or the helpful side of it. And there's an opportunity, right? It's not an overwhelming, daunting challenge. There's an opportunity to actually put what you've learned to use.
Yes.
So to continue the creative process. And I
Yeah.
think it's okay to sort of talk a little bit about that, or sort of air it, because a lot of people don't understand why they stop.
Mm.
Why they can feel, or they have the impression that they're really excited about something, or they want to do something. They want to make changes in their life, or they want to have a better life, or any kind of thing like that. And they don't move.
Mm-hmm.
And then it becomes, instead of a creative process that, generally speaking, will roll forward. Like each moment, we talk about presence in the Presence Posse, moment to moment to moment. It is a progression. We only are in one moment at a time.
Right. That's all we
But
can be.
it's not, we don't go moment to moment to moment backwards. There's a moment to moment, as far as we understand it, forwards. So it's like they stop moving forward. And so the idea is, what is it? What's the missing piece of that, where the imagination turns into a creative process that is brought to life in the, what some people would call the 3D world, or the physical world, or as you call, into action rather than inaction. And sometimes it's like, as you describe it beautifully, it's having the opportunity, or seeing the opportunity, to put your training to use. And what I also hear is the absence of overwhelming fear, the absence of an expectation of a negative consequence.
And I don't know that we always recognize it as fear, because it can be quite. Now I can't think of the word. Sneaky is the best thing that I could come up with. But it's also tempting to put it on outside things. Right? Like it comes up, and I can't do this because something externally is stopping me. Right? Like the pandemic would have stopped travel, and it being present in that moment, that was something that couldn't happen. And so as I planned this retreat and have been trained, that woman that was doing the training had done international retreats before that and was not prepared for that, right? So now you make sure that people that are traveling have travel insurance.
Mm-hmm.
When they come to a retreat, or they sign up to come to a retreat. She said that was not something that was part of it before, and is now obviously something she's integrated because of that experience. But during that time, it was an external thing, right? So you could point to different things like that, the political climate or the financial climate or the whatever isn't the way it needs to be for me to create and be successful with, right? And so it looks like that, but it may actually just be a lack of confidence or fear that's being reflected in that external condition, that it's much easier to blame it on than it is to look at the fear.
Yeah. Yeah. And thank you for that. You have me thinking about what a lot of people may not recognize, and that will be that sometime in their lives, they may have been expected to do something that was way beyond their capacity at the time. This will be, for example, children who were expected to practically behave as adults. And how many times have so many of us heard, "You should have known better," when we were kids, that we take into our adult life and "I should have known." We take over the broken records from our parents or teachers or whoever taught us that we should have known better. How could we possibly should have known better when we were 3 and didn't have life experience, or when we were expected to be the parent for our parents' children, or even the parent for our parents because they didn't function well? When we were too young, didn't have the life experience, were not prepared, couldn't possibly know. And then we come into a situation where there's something we would love to do, or we get an idea to do something, which is a natural thing for us to do because we are naturally creative people. It's also part of our survival, right? If you have to be able to survive, you need to get creative with your surroundings to get away from difficult situations, for example. But the idea is we get in a situation where we imagine something and want to create as we do. And then we have this, yeah, but it's too dangerous. I'm not good enough. It's overwhelming. I'm afraid that that's going to be too hard, whatever it is, or somebody's going to cause problems, or I'll never be able to manage it, or whatever it is, because we've had those experiences as children where we were put in situations that were way too advanced for us.
So yeah,
And
we experienced the situation as having more power than we had.
exactly. And we can, if we don't realize that's what's going on, we risk continuing to see ourselves as helpless and weak and powerless, because that's how we felt back then. Instead of, yeah, but now I'm, I don't know, 20, 25, however much older I am. In this case, I'm over 60 even. And if we've taken that mentality with us through our lives without seeing through it, without unmasking it, we can still feel like we are helpless and weak and powerless and all of that, without realizing that what we've actually done is closed off our creativity that would naturally find a solution to get us out of, even if the situation were difficult, we would be able to be creative about it and find a solution. When the fear and the overwhelm hits, it can be like a brick wall. We can't see through it. It's in front of us. We don't feel strong enough to knock it over. We don't think, where's the sledgehammer? We're like fixated this way. And it's like, nope, can't. Stop. And the creative process stops, at least the forward creative process in that particular situation. If we use the retreat as example, you wouldn't do it. You would find your creativity would go in other directions, like, I need to be creative about my excuses for not doing the thing. Right?
Right.
So be super creative about why I can't. And if I'm not present to that, I can even believe that it's true.
Oh,
Without
absolutely.
realizing.
And I think that's all too common, that we believe what we've been conditioned to believe or what we've experienced as a young person, right? To be our truth. So for me, I've spent the first 30 years of my life believing that everything that I lived up to that point was true. And when I got in recovery, one of the best things that I learned was that everything that I knew was subject to revision.
That's
So
such a good
then
word.
I could start rethinking things and looking at my belief systems. And so that was half my life ago, and I'm still doing it. Right? Like maybe if you started younger, it would happen quicker. I don't know. But also, if you have a coach, if you have um, someone who's been down that path of unlearning and questioning and bringing in new belief systems, they can help make that process easier for us, because at different points along the way, different people were very helpful to me. It was still up to me
Mhm.
to do the creative process or not, to look at my belief systems or not, right? But other people can be very helpful in portions of that journey. I'll say that.
Absolutely. And you bring up a really interesting word too, revision, because that's also a creative endeavor.
Mm.
It's like, okay, this is who I think I am. And then there's the creative side of it. Okay, opening up to what else is possible. If not that, and even if you did it as a game, like this could be an invitation to anybody who's watching. Like take a side of a piece of paper and this is who I think I am. And then on the other side of the piece of paper, it's like, okay, all kinds of opportunities to just sort of reveal what else, who else am I? And who can I be? Who am I becoming? That's an incredibly creative process. And the nice thing about it is you don't have to do any of it. Like if that even seems overwhelming, you don't have to take action on any of it.
Right.
You'll probably want to, but you don't have to. If there's any fear in your system, it's a game. It can stay in your imagination. It can stay just a creative process without becoming real. But you
Yeah.
might find that having clarified, revised, gone through that process, and seeing more of who you really are and what you really want, that, as you spoke about earlier, there's an excitement that arises, an incentive, a spark, if you will, of
Mhm.
vitality inside of you that becomes a drive. It's like, well, not that. That's not serving me anymore. Wait a minute. That wasn't even who I really am. That was just who I told myself I was, or other people told me I was. But I don't have to believe that anymore. And it never really fit at the time anyway. It was just the circumstances. So what now? And right then you've got a whole open creative process waiting to happen.
Yeah. And even if you're like, this is who I think I am, so that's who I am. I don't have anything to put over here, right?
Yeah.
Then start with who would I want to be, right? Like you said, this, what else is possible? And almost you have to have that sort of positive draw of who would I want? What else would I want in my life? What else would I like to experience to start the creation or the imagination? To, because if you imagine things that maybe you are that you don't want to be, I mean, there's no reason not to list them, except you're probably not going to want to take action on something you don't want to take action on,
Yeah.
becoming someone you don't want to be, right? But also, some of what you believe about yourself could lead you to be someone that you don't want to be. So you can start to see that in those lists as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also the possibility that you imagine and even create a persona of a person or a life or both. you would like to be and have, and something in you says, that's not possible. That will never be me. Which is a lot of times people will look at other people and envy them.
Oops, sorry.
People will envy them, for example. And
Yeah.
in that envy is a silent agreement with oneself. I can't have that. Because in envy, like pure envy, it's not the, oh, I want what that person has and I'm going to create that for myself. It's the, I want what that person has, but I can never have it. Again, there's a stop in the creative process. And so it might just be that when you open up to this idea of who do I want to be, what kind of life do I want to have, that you notice that your response to all of that is, but that's not in the cards for me. And then, yeah, I see your eyebrows going up. It's, how do you know?
Yeah.
Like,
Who
where
told
in
you
you
that?
decided that isn't possible? What, I mean, I'm assuming that somebody does not have a gun to your head, so that it's not. And even then, it's your choice to move towards it and let them shoot you, or at least see if they will, or not. And I'm not recommending, seriously not. Yeah, it's the idea of what's possible in the imagination and how, in what direction do you go. I remember at one point in my life where I was terrified to do something. There was something in particular I really wanted to do, and I was really, really scared. And it was based on an old situation that had happened that was life-threatening at the time. And then somebody, just as I was having the conversation with someone, said, well, who's going to harm you now?
Right.
And I went, it was like a slap in the face, because it was so ingrained in my system that there was no way I could have that thing that I really wanted, or that life that I really wanted, because I would be I would be dead, right? And,
Right. There's a brick wall there.
Called it out, and I was just like, brilliant. And that's all it took. It was like, oh, cool. Zoom, full speed ahead. So sometimes when we believe it's not possible, it's kind of necessary to check, is there any truth to that now? Like, is there any real truth to that right now? And if it in fact is a life-threatening situation, that's a different situation. Although what you do with it in your mind is something else. Like how you meet that with presence can still be very creative. But if it isn't, if it is just something connected to the old, something was dangerous.
Right. I think that you're right, though. In the moment where you are in that fight, flight, freeze brain, you don't have access to higher thinking or imagination, or you're stuck at the level of survival. So that wall had to be broken for you. And yeah, see, that's what I mean. Other people can be very helpful at part of the journey, because you just didn't question it. It was a wall, and you would not survive if you went past that wall or tore it down, or however you dealt with it, right? Like climbed over it, went around it, under it, through. It's the best.
There are so many creative ways to go at it.
Yeah, I like the sledgehammer. I just do.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's, sometimes it is kind of like that. You just smash the whole thing.
Yeah. She gave you, or he or whomever gave you a sledgehammer, and you went, yay.
At least the opportunity to find one, which is, it's always there. There's the presence to be able to see it as a witness, like as I witness myself, as I witness my thinking, as I witness my assumptions or my interpretations, or even another person's seemingly judgments or whatever. As I witness it and present to it, I can make very clear choices about which way I want to go and what is in line with what I have imagined for myself, what I have wanted for myself or not. It
Yeah, it was
is,
a lot more years from that 30-year-old until now that I got to the point where I could do that. Like, be the observer of myself in a situation like that. That's one way to extricate yourself from that fight flight mode, right? Is to see it as something that you're participating in rather than something you are.
yeah.
Like, that's a role in my life. That's not who I am. So let me look at it. But that was a much longer process for me to get to that point.
Yeah. I think that's, especially if we've been conditioned for a long time and had a lot of overwhelming experiences, or even all it takes is one really strong experience and it can knock us completely off balance and we can get stuck in tunnel vision for a long time. It depends. Some of us have had a lot of those, and some of us have basically only had one, but it was big enough that it changed who we were. So, in that way, who we thought we were.
Yeah, who we would allow ourselves to be.
Mm,
The expression we would allow ourselves to have, whether that be verbal or otherwise,
yeah.
right?
And how we saw ourselves, which all of that is a very creative process. Whether or not it's the most useful creative process or not remains to be seen. In many ways, I have discovered many creative processes that were not particularly useful after that specific event or situation. So, in that specific situation, it was my creative response to that was to, for example, not answer back because answering back was dangerous.
Right.
So, part of the creativity was I was creative in my mind. I had lots of things I would say or think or interpret or see, but just not say them out loud. And I recall one situation where I discovered about a month later that I was still doing that, even though I wasn't in the situation anymore. And then it was easier to let it go because I realized it wasn't necessary. I was still thinking, I was like thinking the same way as I had been thinking when I needed to be
Right. So there
careful.
was a lack of presence that you recognized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the moment, as Eckhart Tolle says, in the moment you recognize that you are not aware, you are aware. And that moment, it's like just two cells coming together, you get this big bang, and it's like, okay, I am now awake. I see what I'm doing. I don't need to do that anymore. And sometimes it can take a little while before we can put down our swords or put down our habits that we've had and learn new habits or go new ways. Sometimes we fall back. And even Jan, who's not on this talk, but Jan Hart from the Presence Posse, she actually talks about a situation where she was in a learning situation and she had discovered what she really wanted. And then she had a few episodes where she kind of fell off the wagon, where she fell back to her old habit. And then she caught herself. And I was like, what are you doing? And then it was over. Once she really realized that, wait a minute, I don't actually want to do this anymore. I have something better. I have something I would rather do. And then she didn't have that problem anymore. And so, to call it a problem, it's not the right word, but yeah.
Challenge.
So, yeah, the incentive was stronger, I guess you could say, or there was more presence, more ability to, a stronger ability to stay present to what was this moment, this moment, this moment, and not that moment, that moment. Not the
Yeah,
behind.
well, and that was another thing when I got in recovery. They talked about, like, we have these masks that we wear. And quite often people will talk about, I have this hat and this hat and this hat, right? Like, we have filters for who we can be in what kinds of situations.
Yeah.
And for me, I was like, mask, I've got a suit of armor.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I had several experiences that led me to feel like I had to live within these bounds. right, and protect myself. And so yeah, that's still a process of feeling safe within myself, right, without having to have filters for different situations and different, and sometimes that's accurate.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to answer back in a situation where you're going to put your life on the line. That might not be a good choice, but you can answer back in other situations. So it becomes that presence becomes more precious
Mm-hmm.
to you because it allows you that freedom to, and discernment and trust in yourself to know when you can choose and that you have a choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like before that, it doesn't occur to you that you actually have a choice. People can tell you that, but it does
Yeah.
not feel that way.
Not going to feel that way. Yeah. At least at the time.
Right.
And you brought up the word discernment as well. That's what the word I was thinking. The presence to be able to discern and not react.
Yes.
Or we talk about flow sometimes and like this creative flow, but there's also the flow that goes into, it's a different kind of flow. It's when I'm in the flow of my old behavior, because there's a flow
Yeah.
to that, right? It's like I go right into this sort of path. Oh, guess who's here? I
Oh, there we go. Hi.
can't. So the flow of the habit, that's just kind of riding that wave that we know. There's a flow in that. And I think it's interesting when people talk about flow, not recognizing there's that kind of flow.
Your table.
Yep, Jasmine shook my table. Go for a minute, and when I'm done, I'll come out, okay? Take
Bye,
Jasmine with you. Jasmine, thank you. Well,
Exactly, going with the flow. There's the other flow, of course, that is the
Will not listen to me.
going with the flow. So I'll just, while Danielle is talking to Kent, hey, he's back. The flow, which is, we don't know where it's going. We just ride that wave. The difference between riding the wave we know and riding the wave we don't know. And both are creative in their own way, but one will be, I guess there's an element of trust in it if that's what you need. If you have some fear in your system, again, something that wants to block the creative flow, the creative flow towards the unknown or seemingly unknown, then you may need a certain level of trust or faith in order to ride that wave, going into unexplored territory.
right, and an ability to
We bought diapers for Charles.
deal with the question
We bought the attraction bag.
and not have to know the answer. The
Mhm.
ability to be comfortable in not knowing, and that takes some doing if you have had fearful or overwhelming experiences, right? Like that doesn't feel safe.
Yeah.
So as you gain experience in doing that because you trust yourself to do it once, then that becomes more comfortable. It's still, I don't know that I consider it particularly comfortable yet, but it can be exciting as opposed to terrifying.
Yes.
So that neither one are necessarily comfortable, right? But
Yeah.
one is much more fun discomfort than the other.
I think part of it,
Ran into me, Grandma.
when it has to do with connecting past overwhelming or painful experience where I didn't master it, for example. There was something that was, we can put it the way, the situation was stronger than I was. I didn't know how to handle it. And especially if I've interpreted it as I can't handle it. I couldn't handle it. I was weak, for example. I was powerless. And then I take that into new situations. I won't be able to handle it. If that is a kind of ingrained idea of who I am, then this idea of trust can be very challenging, because if I assume that I won't be able to handle it, it's kind of hard to have any level of trust. The person I have to trust is me. And in fact, unless I'm completely, I don't know what I would say about that. Basically, the majority of us have made it through all kinds of challenging stuff. If I look at my own life, I'm still here. It's amazing. I'm still here. So the idea that I wouldn't be able to handle something is absurd. It might be that I wouldn't be able to handle it in the best possible way, or in a way that is painless for me in some way, emotionally painless. But it doesn't mean I won't be able to handle it. And if I can't handle it in the moment, like it feels like too much, or I don't know how to do it or something, it's like, well, afterwards I can learn something about how to handle it, so that if that situation arises again, I'm not the same person. I have more skill. So the likelihood that I will be able to handle it better is bigger. There's more, it's more likely. So I think a lot of the times we end up in this stymied creativity space where we go round and round, or we sort of like a Pac-Man or whatever those games are where you hit the wall and you keep running back and smashing into the wall, is an idea we have about ourselves. I can't jump on that wave because it'll be too much for me. I'm not good enough. That sort of, again, what we spoke of before, the sort of lack of trusting ourselves to be able to do what needs to be done. And I mean, a lot of the time, the only way you're going to know what needs to be done is by actually doing it, especially if it's the first time. The only way is to do it. And with presence, there's this often quite immediate indication of where to go and what feels helpful or useful and what doesn't. As I'm present moment to moment, I'll notice the differences for each moment on what it feels like and what direction. And sometimes we just don't know. And then we have to choose. And sometimes choosing to do nothing is an actual choice, even though we may not have made a conscious choice about it. Right?
Yes. I have to choose my moments to unmute my mic right now.
I understood that.
So, yeah, a couple things occurred to me as you were speaking, and now, of course, I can't come back to them exactly. But it had to do with that observer mode, being over identified with the character that we are, right? So if we're able to pull back into that observer mode and let our character play that out, that makes it more like I'm going to take things less personally if I don't do well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the presence actually, I think I might say that would give you more courage. Yes. The more present you are, the more courageous you can be.
I like how you brought in the idea of taking it personally, because there's that, if I'm not good enough, it's another person who's going to see me that way. Instead of, I did what I could at the time. If I could have done better, I would have done that.
Right.
Right. So I mean, it just makes perfect sense. Like, if I can do better, I do better. And if I can't do any better than this is what I can do right now. Maybe there's a piece of the puzzle missing that I don't know about. If somebody else thinks it's not good enough, that doesn't mean I'm not good enough. Even if I think it's not good enough, it doesn't mean I'm not good enough. It's not about my identity, my person. It's about the thing, right? And then there's whatever judgment is in that. That's not about my value. And my value doesn't come from outside of me. My value is intrinsic. I am here. I'm a being. I'm part of the same energy that the universe is made of and whatever else is made of. That's all there is. So there is no better or worse than. There is no more or less value in me. So it's a matter of, okay, did I manage the task up to another person's expectations? Not necessarily. Did I manage up to my own expectations? Not necessarily. But okay. Like you say, there's no fear, there's no pain. Well, it is what it is. That's the presence of it. It's what is. And I can either fight it and make it a problem, or I can just know, be one with what is. Because what else is there? Really?
Yeah, and then you have the choice whether you want to try to develop that strength or you want to recognize it as not a strength, right? And you can ask someone else to do that portion of whatever creative process it is. And that's part of experiencing other people helping you too, is that it makes it easier to ask people to help you. Like, I was quite adept at asking people who weren't capable of helping me when I was kind of stuck in my victim mode. So that was one of the things that kept that going for me. I had to learn to actually ask people that could actually help. And once they did, then I was more willing to help people too, or ask people to help me with my process.
That's really cool too, because we may not be consciously aware that we have kind of, I was talking about riding the wave of the habit or riding the wave of something that we don't know yet. We may be riding the wave of a habit and not be aware that that's what they're doing. That's what we're doing. So when you mentioned this, I chose people who were not up to the challenge, put it that way. That might have been a habit, right? We're used to being disappointed. We're
And
used to not being
it
heard, for example.
bolstered this story that, like, if it is to be, it's up to me, right?
Which in a way, again, from how creative can we be with that? If it is to be, it's up to me. If through the eyes of a person who the only buddy who's going to get it done is me, right? Can't depend on anybody else for anything. That kind of perspective.
That's the story that bolstered, right?
Right.
But also,
or if it is to be, it's up to me. I do my part. I can ask people to do their part, and I check with them to make sure that they're actually doing it. And if they're not, then I need to maybe talk to somebody else. Because in a positive sense or a useful, helpful sense, if it is to be, it's up to me. How much do I want it? Do I want it that much that I'm willing to do what it takes to get it without being self-destructive? Or do I want to just prove to myself that I'm right, I'm not good enough, nothing ever works out, blah, 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 blah. Let's ride the wave of the old habit instead of going into riding the new wave of the new territory. So the saying is interesting. You can have quite a few different perspectives of how you take that particular, if it is to be, it's up to me perspective.
Yeah, and that makes it even trickier. Like, I'm just letting go of this aspect of that story, because also if I don't do anything, nothing happens.
Right.
If nothing changes,
well, something will. Something will happen, but it'll either be same old, or somebody will take over and you're sitting there or whatever. I mean, something happens. It just not moving towards what you want.
Right.
So Part of the one of the things I've learned to do is to play with thoughts. With presence work, it's noticing that they're all just thoughts, really. So, okay, that's a thought. So I can play with it. What if I change the words around a bit? Or what if I turn a no to a yes, or a maybe, or the color or the smell or the direction, or like just play with it and see what else shows up. And then the next question, am I willing to go that way? Is this something I want for myself, for example? But just the willingness to play with a thought that seems like an absolute, this is true. And is it? Is it? Are you sure about that? And what if it's not?
And what other beliefs are attached to it?
Yeah.
Right? That was what you kind of pointed out, was this belief that I called it, but there were other beliefs attached to that, because this saying meant that in my head, but it doesn't mean that altogether, right? I just had attached these other beliefs to it.
And we can be really good at that, having all of these spider webs and octopi and all
Creative
of that.
creatures.
Yes, because all of that is creativity. So as we come towards the end of the talk, I kind of want to throw out that question of, how do you want to use your creativity? For those of you who are watching, how would you like to use your creativity? Do you want to use it to help you in a useful way? Hi, Chelsea. Or do you want to use it to hold you back? Do you want to use your creativity to prove yourself right when you say it can't be done, or I can't do it? Or do you want to use your creativity to challenge, to imagine something new, create something new, and play? I just thought I'd throw that out towards the end of the talk, and you are welcome to take it, and you are welcome to leave it.
And if you don't think you're creative and you've ever created one of these, you're creative.
Yes.
Oh, yeah, I created a child who's created a child. So I don't know where I wasn't creative, but I definitely did. So you can, if you're watching this, realize that that might not be the truth.
Exactly. And again, we're into another creative process. It might not be true. So if it isn't, what else? What might be true? What are other possible truths, or at least other possible possibilities? And start a new creative process. So we are just over the hour. Do you have, other than created babies who create babies, do you have anything that's on now that you'd like to tell people about?
I don't right at the moment. I have been really quiet on social media for several months, and I've just kind of started back, and I'm hoping to get back in the swing of things. But there's your raspberry for the day. I just felt like I needed a little downtime, and that there was a lot of drama coming. There's a lot of fast changes that are external to us that I will speak for myself, need to be able to pay attention to and protect my peace through.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes. And that's a choice too, isn't it?
Yes. So that's what I'm encouraging people to do, just freely on Facebook right now. And if you would like to reach out to me on Facebook Messenger, that's the best place to actually reach me.
Cool. And you can find Danielle also in the Presence Posse group or on the Presence Posse page if you need to connect with her. You can get to her it's all on Facebook. So if you can't find her, you can find her in the group or on the page, and then click on her name there and send her a message from there. Mm-hmm. And she's got some cool stuff, and you might want to check out some of the stuff that she writes on her Facebook profile, because it's pretty good stuff. I am, see, even Chelsea agrees with me. I am actually starting a few things. I have a few openings for clients. If you'd like to work with me one-to-one, I also have an online course called Undefiable that is really about a lot of the things that we just talked about, sort of letting go of the old beliefs of yourself and building confidence so that you can stand solid and be who you truly are in the world, in your life, and live the life that you were meant to live. So if you'd like more information about that, you can reach out to me at this email address that you see at the bottom of the screen, or you can go to my website that you can also see at the bottom of the screen and get more information about that. I'm also going to be doing a challenge to do with goals because we're in February and we've already gone past our resolutions for 2025, those of us who bother to make them, and maybe you need a little bit of a support to keep it going or get more clear about where you'd like to go with your goals. So I'm going to be doing something about that. And I will be returning to what I call conscious, courageous conversations very soon. And that is basically practicing presence along with other people without your masks. So if you're interested in any of that or you'd like to ask me some questions, you're more than welcome to contact me. So that's that. And we thank you once again, all of those who are watching. And you are welcome, of course, to ask us questions or comment when you watch the replay as well. We will be back next week with another topic. And hopefully, if everybody's able, because we've been having some technical challenges and scheduling challenges, next topic was presence, and I honestly can't remember what the third part of the trilogy was.
It was either expression.
Yes. Yeah, that's what it was. Presence and expression. Thank you very much. So you're welcome to join us again next Monday at the regular time where the Presence Posse will present presence and expression. Take care, everybody. And thanks again for being here. And especially thank you to you, Danielle McMahon. And
Yes,
I'm Miriam.
thank you, Miriam.
See you next time.